Hello, I'm David Scranton, and thank you for clicking on this video today as we talk about bear markets versus bull markets and how it affects your money. And while we're on that topic, we're also going to talk about dollar cost averaging and how dollar cost averaging could work with you or work against you. And I promise we'll try to keep it brief. We won't go in too much depth, just enough information that you can use to help enhance your own sense of financial security. So basic definitions. A bull market is typically where a market is running, a market's charging, it's doing well. A bear market is a cold market, runs like a bull, hibernates like a bear. So a bear market's generally a downward trending market, a market that's not going so well. But see, here's where it gets tricky. There are short-term bull markets and short-term bear markets, and there are long-term bull markets and long-term bear markets. And the short term is often referred to as cyclical, short-term cycles. And those cycles might last anywhere from 1 to 2, maybe 3 years at the longest. And then you get into what's called secular cycles, which are longer term, more generational cycles, which could be a 15 to 20-year bull market where you're generally trending upward with some dips in the middle, and a 15, 20-year bear market, which is doing poorly for about 15 or 20 years. But see, here's where it gets confusing. In the middle of a secular long-term bull market, there are short-term bear market periods. There are periods for a year, year and a half, 2 years in the middle where the market's actually going down. But as soon as it ends, the long-term upward trend takes off again. You can have a cyclical bear market within a secular bull market. But the same is true in reverse. You could have a secular bear market like 2000 through 2013, where essentially the market made a big W shape. It had a 50% drop in recovery when the tech bubble burst. Then the financial crisis hit and had a 60% drop in recovery. That's all arguably part of one secular bear market. Why? Because it was a 13-year period where we had zero growth on the major market indices. But within there, we had a great cyclical bull market, right? After the tech bubble burst and dropped by half, the market recovered. And simple math says if you need to recover from a 50% drop, you've got to get 100% gain, right? Because if a dollar gets squashed down to 50 cents, now that 50 cents has to double to get back to a dollar. That doubling is 100% gain. That was a heck of a cyclical bull market inside of a secular bear market. And the same was true after the financial crisis. The market dropped almost 60% and then had a huge recovery well over 100%. Okay? Now, in order to take advantage of those short-term cyclical cycles, you had to be able to get in when the market was near its bottom and ride it up. If you just were in the market in the year 2000 and stayed in the market till 2013 with a lump sum of money, then you would have basically ridden it down, back up again. And yeah, you had cyclical bears. I know it's a mouthful, it's a tongue twister. You had cyclical bears, cyclical bulls, but they all negated each other, so you didn't earn anything. But if you were timing the markets and you were being patient and you weren't getting in the early 2000s, you waited for the tech bubble to burst and then you got in, not at the exact bottom because you can never time the exact bottom other than just being really lucky, then you could have benefited from that short-term cyclical bull market. Same is true after the financial crisis. If you were out of the markets and patient and sitting on the sidelines, well then when the market bottomed out by spring of 2009, then you could have gotten some money back in somewhere, not exactly on the bottom, but somewhere at a lower value and ridden it back up again. But most people don't do that. Most people are buy and hold investors. They've been taught to become buy and hold investors. So that means the average investor who sat in the market for that 13 years had zero growth. But now we talk about that dollar cost averaging concept, because dollar cost averaging is the thing that either makes that situation a lot better or makes it a lot worse depending upon your stage of life. So what is dollar cost averaging? Well, the basic definition of dollar cost averaging is putting a fixed dollar amount of money into an investment over time, doing it on a regular basis, let's say every month. Now you might say, what's the big deal about that, Dave? That's called saving money. That's what everyone should be doing, right? And you're right, but mathematically, it actually has a bigger impact than that. Because if you're putting money in, let's say your 401k every month, when the market dips, yeah, your lump sum that's sitting there lost money, it's down. But that new money you're putting in is now buying more shares at a lower price. If the market's down by 50%, then you're basically buying shares at half the price, which means you're buying twice as many shares when the price is down. So now when the market comes back, it doesn't have to come all the way back for your account to come back. Your account comes back sooner because you bought more shares at a lower price. Your break-even point is sooner. And the same happened again between 2007 and 2013 with the financial crisis. So that's the benefit of dollar cost averaging. Now, when you're young and you're starting to save, you might have $25,000 sitting in your 401k. And if you're putting in $5,000 a year, that's a pretty profound dollar cost averaging effect, right? Because now you've got $25,000 here. And when the market was underwater for 7 years, from 2000 to 2007, you're buying more shares in a lower market, a lower price per share. So you're more than doubling the amount of shares. Just that 35,000 you put in over the 7 years, 5,000 a year for 7 years, more than double the 25,000 you started with. But it probably tripled it or quadrupled it again because you bought more shares at a cheaper price. But now let's say you get close to retirement and you get a market drop like this. So let's say somebody was 60 years old, going to retire in a few years. Now the dollar cost averaging effect is not that profound. Why? Well, let's say now you've doubled your savings. You're putting $10,000 a year into your 401k. But let's say you've done a good job. You have $1 million in there. Now over 7 years, you're not doubling your account value. You're only putting in $10,000 a year for 7 years. That's $70,000. And even though you're buying more shares when the market's down, that $70,000 doesn't do quite as much to get you that $1 million lump sum to break even faster. So you start to lose dollar cost averaging benefits as your lump sum grows relative to how much you're saving. Now that's where a lot of people, as they get older and they want to stay in the stock market, they go to high dividend paying stocks. Why? Because if you're in high dividend paying stocks, now those dividends can be reinvested to buy more shares. So that, along with what you're saving, helps your dollar cost averaging effect, if you will. But then if you get to a point where you've stopped, you've retired, you're not saving anymore, well then the dollar cost averaging benefit has ended. And now if you get underwater for 13 years in the stock market, like 2000 to 2013, there's nothing you could do to make lemons out of lemonade. You're stuck with it. And guess what? The lemonade gets even more sour if you're taking income out, right? Because now you're doing something called reverse dollar cost averaging, which means now you're taking that $1 million and let's say you're withdrawing 30 or 40,000 a year, 3 or 4%, not a huge amount. But now as the market's dropping, you have to sell more shares every month to get the income that you need in retirement to pay your bills. And because you're selling more shares, you're cannibalizing extra principal. And now when the market recovers, your account doesn't recover. So not only does it not recover quicker because of dollar cost averaging, but also it doesn't even recover at the normal break-even point of 13 years. It takes longer. In fact, it may never recover because again, you sold twice as many shares in a down market, you cannibalized your principal. It is called reverse dollar cost averaging. Some other people, you might have heard the term a sequence of returns risk, which is what others call it. So again, it's important to understand these cyclical and secular bull markets and bear markets because you have to think about when you're in retirement, you're getting near to retirement. Yes, the secular bear market could catch you off guard, even if you're 13 years out of retirement, as we saw at the turn of the century. And if your dollar cost averaging has less effect now because your lump sum has grown, you can't even turn lemons into lemonade, really. And to make it worse, if you're retired and taking distributions, now it turns into really, really sour lemons. And you run the risk of depleting your accounts, especially if that secular bear market, or those first 13 years, if you will, as in the beginning of this century, if it happens in the first few years of your retirement. So I hope this helps clarify some of the confusion amongst the terms bull market, bear market. the long-term secular trends versus the short-term cyclical trends, and how dollar cost averaging factors in could either be your best friend or your worst enemy.